Welcome back. Let's talk about a specific solution that'll include a few areas that you're going to see again. The first is, how do we set up an on-prem connection to Google Cloud? And then we'll add to it by talking about how we can tie in GCDS, for example, but also how do we determine a good rendering solution. Let's say, for example, we have a mobile application and we want to render graphics or something of that nature. Let's talk about it. First, as you see, I have my on-prem and I have my GCP set up. So this is my on-prem, this is GCP. What we want to do now is we got to discuss, for example, connectivity. We know that if we want to connect securely to Google Cloud, we want to really look at either Cloud VPN or Cloud Interconnect. That gives us really two choices, and we could also consider peering as well. If there's anything about cost being a concern, direct connect would not be, one of the things you want to consider if there wasn't any significant technical requirements that would require that. Now, we have to consider too, if cost isn't a big deal, the best way to connect to Google Cloud is through what is called Cloud Interconnect. So I'm going to call this Cloud Interconnect for short because of space. But basically, we want to connect, of course, our on-prem to GCP. Now, Cloud Interconnect is what? We have our 10 terabytes of bandwidth. We're good to go. Should be able to handle anything we slam at it, right? Now, of course, Cloud Interconnect may not be available in every location, of course. You may need to look at Partner Interconnect. And to be honest, Partner Interconnect could actually work just as good and be more cost effective, because with Google Cloud Interconnect, you pretty much have to subscribe to the whole 10 terabytes. With Partner Interconnect, you get down to megabits, and it's a fraction of what you need from a cost perspective in some cases. So if you only need a fraction of that, then maybe Partner Interconnect could work just fine. And again, there's pros and cons to each. You'll need to look into what makes sense for your environment. Now, what we want to do here is I want to connect, for example, our VPNs first. So even though we're running Cloud Interconnect, it's best practice, of course, to have a VPN. So what do we want to do? We have to go ahead and set up our VPN. Now on this end, we're going to have, of course, remember Cloud VPN is what? A managed service, gateway to gateway. So we're going to go ahead and have a VPN here, right? And we're going to use what? Cloud VPN. Now, we would also more than likely need, and remember too, if we're using Cloud Interconnect, we need to do what? We need to use Cloud Router as well with our Cloud VPN in most cases. So we have to think about that. So from a networking perspective, this is just pretty much what we need to do at a high level. Now, what about if on-prem I'm using LDAP, right? I have our users or Active Directory, and I want to sync it up to Google Cloud. Well, I can do that, right? How do I do it? I need to use what's called an organization. I need to set up G Suite. And let me get my pen. And you can see I have LDAP. So what I want to do is connect it over to Google Cloud, right? Now, to do this, we need to create what? An organization. Now, again, there's, of course, more steps to this. When we create an organization, we're going to have an organizational node. Under that organizational node will be an organizational administrator who will then bring in all the projects under that organization. So, for example, if I have company A.com using G Suite, then I could bring in company.com, and that'll let me propagate, basically. That'll let me propagate a one-way to Google Cloud. So if anything changes here, we're good to go, right? That's what we want to do. Now, what about our connectivity? We want to connect to Google Cloud. Well, we can do that. We set up our VPN, and then let's say, for example, we want to have, for example, a rendering farm. A rendering farm is what? We're going to have our databases, our nodes, our queues, etc., a file server. So I'm just going to put in for time purposes, for an understanding perspective, we want to focus on the networking more than the services right now. We'll talk more about services in the upcoming modules, but I just want to give you an idea where you want to go with this. So when we get to the case studies, it's going to be a combination of networking, data services, also storage, compute, whatever it throws at you, right? It'll be a combination of having to pick out the right networking solution, the right storage solution, the right data services. How do you create a pipeline, DevOps solution? And some of the answers will require you to pick out 3 or 4 services in the correct order. So that's really where we're going with this. Okay, so we have our networking down, right? So we know we're going to go with Cloud Interconnect with Cloud VPN. And we also know that we want to tie in our organization. We want to use GCDS as part of the solution. Now what we want to do is I'm just going to put in rendering services. Now, part of the rendering services is going to be a database, a file store. We're going to have also basically a queue manager. And then we'll also, of course, have an API gateway and additional services. Again, just some of the things to consider. Now on Google Cloud's end, we're probably going to need some services, right? Chances are we're going to want to use cloud storage. We're going to need a way to ingest our data and at least bring it in on board to Google Cloud. So cloud storage is an excellent data ingestion tool we could use. And then we'll probably want to have compute, right? So we need to do what? We have to add our compute as well. And then we'll also need to have workflows and other areas like that as well. So we'll go ahead and add, let's see, a couple other services here. Not exactly in order due to space, but we get the point. So let's go ahead and talk about what we might want to have here. Now, what we might want to consider, first of all, because probably the easiest pickings here to talk about is going to be Cloud IAM. Now, when we talk about Cloud IAM, and actually let me just type it in, we need to enable that. We need to use Cloud IAM. Why? Because we're using GCDS, of course, and we're using Google Cloud. We need to have, of course, strict granularity in our permissions or roles, etc. Makes sense, right? Now, the next service we want to talk about here is generally going to be some kind of a cache, a read-through cache generally. We'll just put cache, for example, in this case. And we could tie this into Compute Engine, of course. And we're going to definitely use Compute Engine in this case, let's say. And that's just, again, a high-level architecture for that. And if we think about it, too, let me get a different color here. we're going to have, for example, here, our services like our API gateway, we're going to want to tie in to basically our cloud storage. So we're going to have our ingress coming into cloud storage here. But from cloud storage, what do we want to do? We're going to at least consider a way to pull it into Compute Engine, right? Compute Engine will be able to access it. Now, as part of the solution, we may also have, for example, our nodes over here rendering our solution over to Cloud VPN, through Cloud VPN, of course, over to our caching services. And then we have essentially what is going to be almost like a rendering service acting together here to render our graphics or whatever we're trying to do. Once again, there's certainly a lot more services we can consider and talk about, but from a high-level perspective, I want to make sure we got at least the connectivity options. We're going to talk a lot more about the services coming up further on in the course. Let's go ahead and move on.